She thought it was just a blind date, until his little girl called her mom in front of everyone. Before we begin, drop a comment below with the city you're watching from. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this emotional story. The restaurant went completely silent. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Heads turned in unison toward the woman sitting at table 12. Sarah Mitchell sat paralyzed, her wine glass suspended in the air. As a 6-year-old girl she'd never met in her life, threw her arms around her waist and sobbed into her dress. "Mommy, you came back. You came back." The little girl's voice cracked with desperation, her small hands gripping Sarah's navy blue dress like she was holding onto a life raft in a storm. Tears streamed down her flushed cheeks as she buried her face deeper into Sarah's side, her entire body shaking. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribcage. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Across the table, Daniel Cooper, the man she'd been on exactly 3 dates with, looked like he'd just watched his entire world collapse. The color drained from his face. His hands trembled as he started to rise from his chair. "Emma," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the little girl's crying. "Emma, sweetheart." But Emma wasn't listening. She looked up at Sarah with swollen, pleading eyes that seemed to reach straight into her soul. "Why did you leave me? Daddy said you were in heaven, but you're here. You're really here." Other diners had their phones out now. Some were recording. Others whispered behind their hands. One older woman in the corner had her hand pressed to her chest, tears forming in her own eyes at the raw emotion pouring from this child. Sarah felt the weight of 100 stares, felt the little girl's desperate grip on her dress, felt the world spinning around her. This was supposed to be a simple dinner. The 3rd date, maybe a goodnight kiss if things went well. How did a blind date turn into this moment? And why was this little girl, this stranger's daughter, calling her mom? To understand what happened in that upscale Italian restaurant on a Friday evening, we need to go back 3 weeks. Back to when Sarah Mitchell's life looked very different. Back to before she met Daniel Cooper. Back to when she'd almost given up entirely on love. 3 weeks earlier, Sarah was sitting alone in her Chicago apartment, staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning. Sleep wouldn't come. It rarely did anymore. 8 months had passed since Marcus, her ex-fiancé, the man she'd planned to marry, walked out of her life with nothing but a text message that read, "I need someone more exciting. I'm sorry. More exciting." Those 2 words played on repeat in her head like a broken record. What did that even mean? That she was boring? That her dream of a quiet life, a family, Sunday morning pancakes, and bedtime stories wasn't enough? That she wasn't enough? 32. Sarah felt time ticking away like a countdown clock she couldn't pause. She was a kindergarten teacher who spent her days wiping noses, tying shoelaces, and reading picture books to 5-year-olds who looked at her like she hung the moon. She loved those children fiercely, loved the way they laughed, the way they learned, the way they trusted so completely. But at the end of every day, she went home to an empty apartment. No little voices calling for her. No tiny hands reaching up for hugs. No family of her own. That's where her best friend Jessica found her one Saturday afternoon, curled up on the couch, halfway through her 2nd pint of ice cream, watching romantic comedies she didn't believe in anymore. "Okay, that's it," Jessica announced, grabbing the remote and turning off the TV. "You're going on a date." Sarah didn't even look up from her ice cream. "Pass. Not a request, Sarah. My colleague has this friend. Single dad. 35. Architect. Recently moved to Chicago. And before you say no." "No. Before you say no," Jessica continued, undeterred. "Hear me out. He's not on dating apps. He's not looking for hookups. He's a father to a 6-year-old girl, which means he's already proven he can commit to something. He's mature, stable, and he's specifically looking for something real." Sarah finally looked up, her spoon hanging from her mouth. "I'm done with setups, Jess. I'm done with dating apps. I'm done with guys who ghost after 3 days or who swipe right just to see what happens. Every single one either disappears or just wants something casual until someone better comes along. This one's different. You said that about Brian and Kevin and that guy whose name I can't even remember because he left halfway through dinner. Jessica sat down next to her, her voice softening. I know you're scared. I know Marcus destroyed your faith in this. But Sarah, you have so much love to give. You deserve someone who sees that. And you deserve more than hiding in this apartment pretending you don't still want the life you've always dreamed of. Sarah felt the tears coming before she could stop them. What if I'm not enough again? Then he's not the right one. But what if he is? What if this is the one time you say yes and everything changes? 5 days later, Sarah found herself walking into a coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon, her heart in her throat, scanning the room for a man she'd only seen in one slightly blurry photo Jessica had shown her on her phone. She spotted him immediately. Daniel Cooper sat at a corner table, running his hand through dark hair that looked like he'd been doing that a lot lately. He was handsome, there was no denying that, but it was the exhaustion in his eyes that caught her attention. The kind of tired that doesn't come from one bad night's sleep, but from years of carrying weight no one else can see. When he saw her, he stood up quickly, nearly knocking over his coffee. Sarah? Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm so sorry I'm late. The babysitter called last minute and I had to make backup arrangements and traffic was. He stopped himself, took a breath. I'm rambling. I'm nervous. Hi. Despite her own nerves, Sarah smiled. There was something genuine about his awkwardness. Something real. It's okay. I'm nervous too. They sat down, and for the first few minutes, it was exactly as uncomfortable as first dates always are. Fumbling with coffee cups. Overly polite questions about the weather. Long pauses filled with the hiss of the espresso machine. But then Sarah mentioned she was a teacher, and Daniel's entire face changed. He leaned forward, and for the next 20 minutes, they talked about children and learning and the way kids see the world. Daniel told her about his daughter Emma, how she loved butterflies and purple crayons and insisted on wearing her tutu to the grocery store, how she asked a million questions a day and made him laugh even when he was exhausted. Sarah found herself relaxing, genuinely laughing at his stories, sharing her own about her kindergartners. They moved on to books, discovering they both loved the same mystery novelist. Daniel talked about architecture with a passion that made his tired eyes light up, describing buildings like they were living things. It was easy, natural, like talking to someone she'd known for years instead of 45 minutes. But every time Sarah gently asked about Emma's mother, just trying to understand his situation, the way you do on a first date, Daniel's shoulders would tense. His smile would falter. She lost her mom, he said quietly, staring into his coffee cup. It's been 3 years. It's complicated. The pain in his voice was so raw that Sarah immediately backed off. She didn't push. She didn't pry. She simply said, I'm sorry. That must be incredibly hard for both of you. Daniel looked up at her then, something like gratitude flickering in his expression. Thank you for not asking more questions. The rest of the date felt lighter after that. They talked until the barista started wiping down tables, a gentle hint that closing time was approaching. Neither of them had noticed 2 hours had passed. Outside the coffee shop, standing under the streetlights as the Chicago evening turned cool, Daniel looked at Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. Nervous, hopeful, scared. I'd really like to see you again, he said softly. If that's okay. Sarah felt something flutter in her chest, something she'd thought Marcus had killed for good. It was small and fragile and terrifying. Hope. I'd like that too, she heard herself say. She drove home that night with the windows down, letting the October air rush through her hair, and for the first time in 8 months, Sarah Mitchell felt like maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet. If you're loving this story of second chances and unexpected connections, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button for Rich Tide's channel. Trust me, you won't want to miss where this goes next. But here's what Sarah didn't know as she drove home smiling that night. Here's what she couldn't possibly have known. The reason Daniel tensed up when she asked about Emma's mother had nothing to do with death or grief or loss. It had everything to do with a lie he was telling himself. A lie that was about to shatter in the middle of that Italian restaurant 3 weeks later, when his little girl looked up at Sarah's face and saw a ghost from the photographs he'd shown her every single night. And the question you're probably asking right now is the same one we started with. How does a woman on her third date end up being called mom by a child she's never met? Drop a comment below and tell us. Have you ever been in a situation where something you thought was simple turned out to be way more complicated than you ever imagined? Because what happens next is something none of them saw coming. Their second date happened 4 days later at the Chicago Botanic Garden on a Saturday afternoon when the autumn leaves were putting on their final show before winter arrived. Sarah had suggested it because she loved gardens, loved the quiet peace of walking among living things. Daniel had agreed immediately, mentioning that Emma loved butterflies and that the garden had a special exhibition. They walked side by side down winding paths lined with chrysanthemums and ornamental grasses turning golden in the October sun. Their hands brushed twice before Daniel finally took hers, his palm warm and slightly nervous against her skin. "I've been a single parent for 3 years," he said suddenly, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. "Just me and Emma. No family nearby to help. My parents passed away before she was born, and I'm an only child. It's been the hardest and best thing I've ever done." Sarah squeezed his hand gently. "She's lucky to have you. Some days I'm not so sure. Some days I feel like I'm failing her. Like she deserves better than a dad who sometimes forgets to pack her lunch or who falls asleep during bedtime stories because he's so exhausted. That doesn't make you a bad parent, Daniel. That makes you human." He stopped walking then, turned to look at her with those tired eyes that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. "Can I ask you something? Why teaching? Why spend your days with other people's children?" Sarah felt the familiar ache in her chest, but she answered honestly, "Because I love them. Because every child deserves someone who sees them, who believes in them. And because—" She hesitated, then continued, "Because I've always wanted to be a mother. It's the one thing I've been sure about my entire life." Something flickered across Daniel's face. Pain, maybe, or recognition. But before Sarah could identify it, he was walking again, still holding her hand. "What about Emma's mother?" Sarah asked gently. "Do you share custody or—" Daniel's hand tensed in hers. His jaw tightened. "It's complicated. Maybe when we know each other better, I can explain. Right now, it's too much." And there it was again. That wall. That instant shutdown whenever Emma's mother came up. Sarah felt it like a door closing in her face, but she didn't push. She'd learned from Marcus that pushing someone to open up before they were ready only made them run faster in the opposite direction. But the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Every time, every single time, Sarah even hinted at asking about Emma's mother, Daniel would become distant. His shoulders would tense. His eyes would drift away. The easy warmth between them would cool like someone had opened a window in winter. Despite this, Sarah felt herself falling. She couldn't help it. The way Daniel talked about Emma with such fierce love and visible pain. The way he listened when Sarah spoke. Really listened, like her words mattered. The way he laughed. This genuine, surprised laugh like he'd forgotten how for a while and was just remembering. He was kind, patient, present in a way Marcus never had been. When they were together, Daniel was fully there, not checking his phone every 5 minutes or glancing around the room for something more interesting. But there was a problem growing larger with each passing day. Daniel hadn't introduced her to Emma yet. 2 weeks in, for dates total, and he still kept that part of his life separate, locked behind a door Sarah couldn't open. "I don't bring people into her life unless I'm sure," he'd explained on their 4th date over coffee. "She's been through enough. I can't introduce her to someone who might disappear. I won't do that to her." Sarah understood. She did. But it also made her feel like she was auditioning for a role she desperately wanted but might never get. Like she was forever on the outside looking in at the life she could have if she just proved herself worthy enough. By their 3rd date, the one at the art museum followed by dinner at that upscale Italian restaurant, Sarah felt like she was standing on the edge of something significant. Something that could either be beautiful or break her heart all over again. They wandered through the museum galleries, standing in front of paintings neither of them fully understood but both pretended to appreciate. They made jokes about what the abstract pieces might actually represent. They found a quiet bench in front of a landscape painting of a house by a lake, and Daniel told her about a building he was designing, his whole face lighting up as he described the way natural light would flow through the windows. Then, as they were leaving the museum, Daniel stopped on the steps and turned to her. The afternoon sun caught in his dark hair, and for a moment, Sarah forgot to breathe. "I want you to meet Emma," he said, his voice steady but his eyes nervous. "Next week, if you're ready. Maybe we could go to the park, something casual. Nothing too formal or overwhelming." Sarah felt joy explode in her chest like fireworks. This was it. This was the door opening. This was Daniel saying she mattered enough to let into the most important part of his life. "I'd love that," she managed to say, though her voice came out embarrassingly breathy. "I'd really love that." They went to dinner after, to that Italian restaurant with the white tablecloths and the candles and the kind of atmosphere that made everything feel romantic and significant. Sarah couldn't stop smiling. She was already imagining it. Meeting Emma, maybe eventually reading her bedtime stories, teaching her to paint or plant flowers. She was imagining Sunday mornings and family dinners and all the things she'd dreamed of when she imagined her future. She was imagining a life, family, a second chance at the happiness Marcus had stolen from her. Halfway through their pasta, Sarah excused herself to use the restroom. She needed a moment, needed to collect herself, to calm the butterflies rioting in her stomach. She was nervous about meeting Emma. Terrified, actually. What if the little girl didn't like her? What if Sarah said the wrong thing or was too eager or not engaging enough? In the restaurant bathroom with its elegant mirrors and soft lighting, Sarah washed her hands and stared at her reflection. Her cheeks were flushed. Her green eyes were bright. Her brown hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked happy, genuinely, completely happy for the first time since Marcus had sent that text message 8 months ago. She was smiling at herself in the mirror, giving herself a little pep talk. "You've got this, you're good with kids, Emma's going to love you." When the bathroom door burst open with such force it banged against the wall. A small girl stumbled through, her face red and streaked with tears, her breath coming in panicked gasps. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, wearing a purple dress with butterflies on it. Her eyes darted frantically around the bathroom, scanning the faces of the 2 other women washing their hands. Then her eyes landed on Sarah, and she froze. The little girl's mouth opened in a silent gasp. Fresh tears spilled down her already wet cheeks. She stared at Sarah like she was seeing a ghost, her small body trembling. Sarah's teacher instincts kicked in immediately. She crouched down to the girl's level, her voice gentle and calm. "Sweetie, are you lost? Are you okay? Do you need help finding your parents?" But the little girl wasn't listening. She was staring at Sarah's hair, brown and wavy, falling past her shoulders, at her green eyes, at her gentle smile, at features the child had seen before in photographs, in dreams, in memories that were more imagination than reality. "Mommy?" The word came out as barely a whisper, broken and desperate and full of 3 years of longing. Sarah's heart stopped. "Honey, I think you've..." But before she could finish, the little girl ran. She ran straight at Sarah and threw her arms around her waist with such force that Sarah stumbled backward. The child buried her face in Sarah's navy blue dress and sobbed, deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere, so broken it made Sarah's own eyes fill with tears. "You came back," the little girl cried. "You came back, you came back, you came back." Sarah's hands hovered uselessly in the air, not knowing what to do, where to put them, how to handle this. "Sweetie, I think there's been a mistake." "I'm not." The little girl looked up at her, and Sarah felt the world tilt sideways, because she knew those eyes. She'd seen them across a dinner table just minutes ago. She knew that face, or at least a younger, softer version of it. This was Emma, Daniel's Emma, and she was calling Sarah Mom. The other women in the bathroom had backed away, staring with wide eyes. One of them had her phone out. Sarah felt panic rising in her throat, but her teacher training kept her voice calm. "Emma, Is your daddy here? Let's go find your daddy. Okay? No. Emma's grip tightened, her small fingers clutching Sarah's dress like a lifeline. You'll leave again. You always leave. Daddy said you were in heaven, but you're here. You're really here, and I won't let you go. Sarah's mind raced. Heaven? What was Emma talking about? Daniel had said Emma's mother was gone, that it was complicated, but he'd never said she died. Had he? Emma, I need you to listen to me. But Emma wasn't listening. She was pulling Sarah toward the door, still sobbing, still clutching her dress. Sarah had no choice but to follow, her own heart hammering, her mind spinning with confusion and growing dread. They emerged into the restaurant dining area, and Sarah saw Daniel immediately. He was standing by their table, his phone pressed to his ear, his face pale with panic. He was clearly trying to call someone, his free hand running through his hair over and over. Then he saw them, saw Emma clinging to Sarah, saw the tears, the desperate grip, the way his daughter was looking at this woman like she was the answer to every prayer she'd ever whispered into the dark. The phone slipped from Daniel's hand and clattered onto the table. The restaurant, which had been full of conversation and the clink of silverware and soft Italian music, went silent, completely silent. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-word. Someone's fork hit their plate with a loud clang in the sudden quiet. Emma's voice rang out in that silence, clear and heartbreaking and impossible to misunderstand. Mommy, where did you go? Why did you leave me? Daddy said you were in heaven, but you're here. Sarah stood frozen in the middle of the restaurant. This little girl wrapped around her like a vine and felt 100 pairs of eyes drilling into her. She saw people pulling out their phones, recording. She saw an older woman in the corner with her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She saw a teenage girl whispering urgently to her mother. Daniel moved then, rushing toward them, his face a mask of horror and devastation. Emma, sweetheart, that's not. But Emma wouldn't let go. Her small hands were fisted in Sarah's dress, her face pressed against Sarah's stomach, her whole body shaking with sobs that seemed too big for someone so small. Sarah's instincts took over. Instead of trying to pull away, instead of correcting Emma in front of all these strangers, she slowly knelt down. She lowered herself until she was eye level with this little girl who was breaking apart in her arms. She looked into Emma's face and saw such desperate hope, such raw pain, such absolute need that it took her breath away. This child wasn't confused. This child was drowning, and she thought Sarah was the shore. You look just like her, Emma sobbed, her words tumbling over each other. Just like the pictures. Daddy showed me pictures every night before bed. Your hair and your eyes and your smile. You look just like my mommy. Sarah pushed through the restaurant's heavy front door and stepped into the cool October night. The parking lot was lit by street lamps that cast long shadows across the asphalt. And there, 20 feet away, she saw them. Daniel was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, Emma clutched in his arms. The little girl's face was buried in his shoulder, her small body still shaking with hiccups and the aftermath of sobbing. Her purple butterfly dress was crumpled. One of her shoes had fallen off, and her arms were wrapped around her father's neck so tightly it looked like she might never let go. Sarah's hands were trembling as she walked toward them. She felt calm on the surface. Years of managing classroom crises had taught her how to appear composed even when her insides were screaming, but her fingers wouldn't stop shaking. She clasped them together to hide it. Daniel saw her approaching and stopped pacing. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the parking lot. Then, slowly, carefully, he lowered Emma to the ground. The little girl immediately wrapped herself around his leg, her tear-stained face peeking out at Sarah with a mixture of hope and fear. Daniel ran his hand through his hair once, twice, 3 times. It was a gesture Sarah had seen before, but now it looked desperate, frantic. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw tight, his whole body radiating shame and panic. Her mother, his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. My wife, she didn't die. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach, but she didn't speak. She waited. Rachel. Her name is Rachel. Daniel's hands were shaking now too. She left when Emma was 3 years old. Just left. One morning I woke up and she was packing a suitcase. She said she couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't do motherhood. Couldn't do marriage. She needed to find herself. He said those last 2 words with bitter emphasis, like they were poison in his mouth. Emma whimpered against his leg, and he automatically reached down to stroke her hair, though his eyes never left Sarah's face. She moved to California. She sends birthday cards twice a year, Emma's birthday and Christmas. Generic cards with $50 inside and her signature. Nothing else. No phone calls. No video chats. No visits. She hasn't seen Emma in 3 years. 3 years, Sarah. Emma was 3 when she left, and now she's 6, and her own mother hasn't bothered to visit even once. Sarah's throat felt tight, but she kept her expression neutral, kept listening. Emma barely remembers what she looks like. She was so young when Rachel left. All she has are the photographs I kept. And God, keeping those photographs was the biggest mistake I ever made. I thought I was preserving her mother's memory. I thought I was doing the right thing. Every night before bed, Emma would ask to see pictures of her mommy, and I'd show her. I'd show her the woman who abandoned us like we meant nothing. Daniel's voice broke completely then. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, his shoulders shaking. When he spoke again, his words came out raw and jagged. I told Emma her mom was far away. That's what I said. Far away. But Emma started telling people at school that her mom died. Her teacher called me in for a conference, worried about how Emma was processing grief. And when I tried to explain that no, her mom wasn't dead, just gone, Emma looked at me and said, "It hurts less when I say she's dead, Daddy, because then it's not my fault she left." Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes, but she blinked them back. Emma had buried her face completely against Daniel's leg now, her little hands fisted in his pants. "A 6-year-old, Daniel whispered. A 6-year-old child thought her mother leaving was her fault. Thought if she'd been better, quieter, cuter, smarter, if she'd been more, her mom would have stayed." He looked at Sarah then with such naked pain that she almost stepped back from the force of it. "When Jessica showed me your photo before our first date, my heart sank, because you looked exactly like her, Sarah. Exactly. The brown wavy hair, the green eyes, that gentle smile. You could be Rachel's twin, except Rachel never smiled like that. Not really. Not the way you do." Sarah found her voice, though it came out hoarse. "And you went on the date anyway. You saw that I looked like your ex-wife, and you still showed up." I almost didn't. Daniel's admission came quickly. I almost canceled, but then I thought, what are the odds? What are the chances that this woman who looks like Rachel is anything like her? And I told myself I could handle it, that I'm a grown man, that I could separate the past from the present. But you couldn't. It wasn't a question. No, could. That's the thing, Sarah. That's what I'm trying to tell you. He took a step toward her, his eyes desperate. I kept dating you because you're not her. You're nothing like her. Rachel was cold, distant. She looked at Emma like she was a burden, like motherhood was a prison sentence she was serving. But you, his voice softened, you talk about children like they're miracles. You light up when you tell stories about your students. You're present. You're warm. You're everything she wasn't. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. So what was I then, Daniel? A do-over? A chance to rewrite history with someone who looks like your ex-wife but acts the way you wish she had? No! The word came out sharp, desperate. No, Sarah. I was falling for you. For you. Not for what you looked like or who you reminded me of. For the way you laugh at my stupid jokes. For how you actually listen when I talk about my buildings. For the way you look at the world like it still has magic in it even though someone clearly hurt you too. The accuracy of that last part hit Sarah like a physical blow. He'd seen it. He'd seen her wounds just like she'd seen his. But you lied, she said quietly. Every time I asked about Emma's mother, you shut me out. You let me think she was dead. You let me walk into that restaurant tonight with no idea that I look exactly like the woman who abandoned your daughter. Do you have any idea how that feels? To be ambushed like that. I know. Daniel's voice cracked again. I know, and I'm so sorry. I should have told you the first time I saw you. I should have been honest. I was afraid. He stopped, swallowed hard. I was afraid you'd run. I was afraid you'd think I was using you or that I had some weird fixation. I was afraid of losing something good before it even had a chance to begin. Emma had started crying again, soft hiccuping sobs against Daniel's leg. She was listening to everything, understanding more than either adult probably realized. Sarah looked at this little girl, this broken, hopeful, desperate little girl, and felt something shift inside her. Because she knew the story. She knew it intimately. She'd lived a version of it herself. Sarah thought about Marcus, about the text message that said she wasn't exciting enough, about the 8 months of questioning whether she was enough, whether she'd ever be enough, whether anyone would ever choose her and stay. She thought about how she'd become a symbol of something she never asked to be, a ghost of Rachel, a stand-in for a mother who chose to leave. How Emma had looked at her face and seen salvation, hope, a second chance. She could walk away right now. This was too heavy, too complicated, too much for a relationship that was barely 3 weeks old. No one would blame her. Jessica would bring wine and ice cream and tell her she dodged a bullet. Her rational mind was already mapping out the exit strategy, the kind words she'd use to let Daniel down gently, the way she'd protect herself from another potential heartbreak. This was the easy out, the smart choice, the safe choice. Then Emma's small voice cut through the night air, so quiet Sarah almost didn't hear it. Are you leaving too? For words that shattered every defense Sarah had built around her heart. She looked down at Emma's face, swollen from crying, streaked with tears, filled with a kind of resignation that no 6-year-old should ever feel. The resignation of a child who'd already learned that people leave, that love is conditional, that she wasn't enough to make someone stay. And suddenly Sarah was 8 years old again, standing in her 2nd grade classroom after her father had left. She remembered Mrs. Patterson, her teacher, who had noticed that Sarah stopped smiling, stopped raising her hand, stopped believing she mattered. Mrs. Patterson, who had stayed after school every Tuesday for a month, helping Sarah with homework she didn't need help with, just so Sarah would have an adult who showed up, who chose her, who stayed. Mrs. Patterson had looked at a broken little girl and decided to show up anyway, even though it wasn't her job, even though it wasn't easy, even though Sarah wasn't her child. That teacher had changed Sarah's life, had shown her what stable love looked like, had proven that being left by one person didn't mean she was unlovable. It just meant that person didn't know how to stay. And now Sarah stood in a parking lot, looking at another little girl who needed someone to show up, to choose her, to stay. This wasn't about being Rachel's replacement. This wasn't about filling a void or playing a role or fixing someone else's broken family. This was about choosing, despite the fear, despite the risk, despite the very real possibility of getting hurt again, to show up anyway. Sarah took a deep breath and slowly knelt down on the asphalt. She lowered herself until she was eye level with Emma, just like she'd done in the restaurant, just like she did every day with her kindergartners when they needed to be seen. Emma, she said softly, and the little girl's eyes met hers. Scared, hopeful, guarded. My name is Sarah. I'm not your mommy. I know I look like her, and I'm so sorry that confused you. I'm so sorry that hurt you. Emma's face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her already tear-stained cheeks. But you're nice. You smiled at me. I think my mommy was nice before she left. I think she smiled too. Sarah felt her own tears threatening, but she kept her voice steady. I'm sure she did, sweetheart. And I'm sure she loved you very much, even if she couldn't stay. Then why did she go? Emma's voice was so small, so broken. Why wasn't I enough? Sarah reached out slowly, telegraphing her movements so Emma could pull away if she wanted to. When the little girl didn't flinch, Sarah gently took her small hands. They were cold and sticky from tears and clutching at things. Listen to me very carefully, Emma. You were always enough. You are enough. What your mom did, that wasn't about you. That was about her. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that don't make sense. Sometimes they leave when they should stay. But that's their choice, their problem, their mistake. It was never, ever because you weren't enough. Emma stared at her, processing, wanting to believe but not quite able to. Sarah continued, her voice gentle but firm. I can't be your mom, but if your dad says it's okay, I'd really like to be your friend. Would you like that? Emma thought about this for a long moment, her small face serious. Then she asked the question that mattered most. Will you leave like she did? Sarah could have lied, could have promised she'd never leave, that she'd be there forever, that everything would be perfect. But she'd just told Emma that honesty mattered, that truth mattered, and she wasn't going to start this, whatever this was, with a lie. I can't promise I'll be perfect, Emma. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes. But I can promise you this. If I'm in your life, I will always tell you the truth. I will always try my best. And if something changes, I'll talk to you about it. I won't just disappear. Is that okay? The parking lot was silent except for the distant sound of traffic and the soft hum of the street lamps. Daniel stood frozen, holding his breath, watching this woman he'd known for 3 weeks kneel on dirty asphalt and offer his daughter the most honest, most real promise anyone had given her since Rachel left. Emma wiped her nose with the back of her hand, thinking. It was the kind of place that had been there for decades, with checkered floors and a jukebox in the corner and the smell of waffle cones hanging heavy in the air. Emma sat on Daniel's side of the booth, but she'd angled herself toward Sarah, one leg tucked under her, a bowl of strawberry ice cream with extra sprinkles melting slowly in front of her. Her face was still puffy from crying, but she was talking now, actually talking. My favorite color is purple, Emma announced, pointing at the butterfly on her dress like it was evidence. And I'm in first grade now. Last year I was in kindergarten with Miss Wilson, but now I have Mrs. Henderson and she's really nice but not as nice as Miss Wilson was. Sarah leaned forward, her own mint chocolate chip forgotten in front of her. What makes Mrs. Henderson not as nice? Emma considered this seriously, a spoonful of ice cream halfway to her mouth. Miss Wilson let us have extra recess when it snowed. Mrs. Henderson says we have to follow the schedule. Schedules are important, Sarah said thoughtfully. But so is playing in the snow. Maybe Mrs. Henderson just hasn't figured that out yet. Emma giggled. An actual, genuine giggle that made Daniel's eyes go wide with surprise. His daughter hadn't giggled like that in months. Maybe longer. Do you like butterflies? Emma asked suddenly, pointing at her dress again. I love butterflies, Sarah answered without hesitation. Do you know what's amazing about them? They start out as caterpillars, these little wormy things that crawl around on the ground. And then they wrap themselves up in a cocoon and completely transform into something beautiful that can fly. Emma's eyes went huge. I know. Daddy told me. He said it's called metamorphosis. That's exactly right. Metamorphosis. That's a big word for someone in first grade. Emma beamed, sitting up straighter. I know lots of big words. Daddy teaches me. Want to hear another one? Architecture. That's what my daddy does. He builds buildings with architecture. Sarah laughed, and this time it was completely natural, completely real. Your daddy's very smart. I know, Emma said matter-of-factly, then took a huge bite of ice cream that left pink on her nose. Daniel sat there watching this unfold, his own ice cream untouched, his eyes moving between his daughter and Sarah like he was witnessing something he'd stopped believing could happen. He'd dated 3 women since Rachel left. 3 women who'd seemed nice enough, who'd said the right things, who'd smiled at Emma in that forced, trying too hard way that kids see right through. But Sarah wasn't performing. She wasn't auditioning for the role of stepmom or trying to win Emma over with exaggerated enthusiasm. She was just present, asking real questions, laughing at Emma's 6-year-old logic, treating her like a whole person whose opinions and thoughts mattered. It was what he'd hoped for but hadn't dared to expect. Genuine care, real connection, not someone trying to fill Rachel's shoes, but someone creating her own space. Emma was swinging her legs under the table now, chattering about her friend Sophia who was scared of ladybugs even though ladybugs were nice, and about how she wanted to learn to do cartwheels but couldn't quite get them right yet. Sarah listened to all of it with the kind of attention that made Emma talk faster. share more, open up in a way she hadn't done with a stranger in years. Then Emma set down her spoon and looked at Sarah with sudden seriousness. I have a ballet recital next week. We're doing the Nutcracker. Well, not the whole thing, just parts of it. I'm a mouse. A mouse in the Nutcracker sounds very important, Sarah said. It is. I have a costume and everything. It has ears. Emma paused, her hands fidgeting with her napkin. Can you come? To my recital? The question hung in the air. Sarah's eyes immediately went to Daniel, asking permission, checking boundaries, making sure this was okay. Daniel's eyes were glistening. He nodded, just once, but it carried the weight of everything. Trust, hope, gratitude, fear, all mixed together. Sarah looked back at Emma and smiled. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Emma's whole face lit up brighter than the neon ice cream sign in the window. Really? You promise? I promise. Tell me when and where, and I'll be there. Front row if they'll let me. Emma launched into an excited explanation of what day it was and what time and how Sarah had to wear something nice but not too fancy because it was just the school auditorium, not a real theater. Daniel finally picked up his spoon and took a bite of his ice cream, but Sarah could see his hand shaking slightly. They stayed there for another 30 minutes, letting Emma finish her ice cream and then order a second scoop because, as she explained very seriously, strawberry and chocolate were completely different experiences and you couldn't really know how you felt about the night unless you tried both. By the time they left, Emma was holding Sarah's hand, just reached up and took it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sarah's breath caught, but she squeezed gently back, and they walked to Daniel's car like that. This strange, new, fragile constellation of three people who barely knew each other but had somehow been through a war together. It was past 9 when Daniel finally pulled up in front of the modest 2-story house where the babysitter was waiting with Emma. The little girl had fallen asleep in her car seat in the back, her head tilted at an angle that would definitely give her a crick in her neck, one hand still clutching the paper cup from her ice cream. Daniel carried her inside while Sarah waited in her own car, parked at the curb. She watched through the lit window as he gently woke Emma, as the babysitter, a college-aged girl with a kind face, gathered her things. She watched as Emma, half asleep, said something to her father and pointed toward the window, toward Sarah. Then Daniel was walking back outside, down the driveway, over to where Sarah sat with her window rolled down. She wanted to make sure you were still there, he said quietly, that you hadn't driven away while I was inside. Sarah's throat tightened. I'm still here. Can I walk you to your car? Actually, you're already in your car. Can I just stand here and talk to you for a minute? Yes. Daniel leaned against the hood, and Sarah turned off her engine and got out, leaning beside him. The October night had turned properly cold now, and she could see their breath in the air between them. I should have told you about Rachel from day one, Daniel said, not looking at her. His eyes fixed on the house where his daughter was hopefully being tucked into bed. About the resemblance, about what happened, about all of it. It wasn't fair to you. You walked into that restaurant tonight with no warning, no preparation, and my daughter called you mom in front of 50 people. That's on me. I'm so sorry. You're right, Sarah said, and she felt him flinch at her bluntness. It wasn't fair. I felt ambushed, blindsided. For about 30 seconds tonight, I genuinely thought I was losing my mind. I know, but, Sarah continued, her voice softer now, I also saw a little girl who's been carrying around pain that's way too big for someone so small. A little girl who just wants to be loved and chosen and told she matters. Daniel turned to look at her then, really look at her, and in the streetlight his eyes were red and exhausted and grateful. I need you to know something, Sarah said, straightening up and turning to face him fully. I'm not interested in being Rachel's replacement. I'm not a stand-in. I'm not here to fill a void or play a role or be whoever you wish she'd been. If we do this, whatever this is, we do it at our own pace, as our own people. Building something new, not trying to resurrect something dead. That's all I want. The words came out rushed, desperate. I swear, Sarah, I'm not looking for Rachel 2.0. I'm looking for you, just you, whoever that is. Sarah took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice wavered. "I got left too, 8 months ago, by someone who told me I wasn't exciting enough. That I wasn't enough, period. So I need to know, and I need you to really think about this before you answer. If you look at me 6 months from now, will you see me? Or will you see her?" Daniel pushed off the car and took a step closer, close enough that Sarah could see the exhaustion and honesty written in every line of his face. "I see you," he said firmly. "I've seen you since that first coffee shop date when you laughed at my terrible joke about load-bearing walls. I've seen you every time you talk about your students like they're the most important people in the world. I've seen you tonight, kneeling on dirty pavement to look my daughter in the eyes and tell her the truth even though lying would have been so much easier." He ran his hand through his hair. That nervous gesture that Sarah was beginning to recognize meant he was trying to find the right words. "Tonight scared me," he admitted. "Not because of what happened, but because in that moment when Emma grabbed you and you could have run, should have run, you stayed. And I realized how much I don't want to lose this. How much I don't want to lose you. That's terrifying for someone who spent 3 years building walls to keep people out." Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes again, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from something else entirely. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. "I can't promise this will be easy," she said. "I can't promise I won't get scared or that I won't have bad days where I question everything. But I can promise I'll be honest. I can promise I'll try. And I can promise that if I'm going to do this, I'm all in." "All in sounds perfect," Daniel said, and he smiled, really smiled. For the first time since the restaurant, they stood there in the cold for another few minutes, not touching, not kissing, just existing in this new reality they'd somehow stumbled into. Then Sarah got back in her car, and Daniel watched her drive away, and both of them went home carrying the fragile, terrifying, beautiful weight of possibility. 6 months later, Emma turned 7 years old. The birthday party took over Daniel's entire backyard on a perfect Saturday afternoon in April, when the world smelled like fresh-cut grass and possibility. There were balloons tied to the fence, a table groaning under the weight of pizza and juice boxes, and a massive cake shaped like a butterfly, and approximately 15 children running around in various states of sugar-induced chaos. Sarah sat on a blanket in the grass, surrounded by wrapping paper and ribbons, helping Emma open presents while the birthday girl narrated each one at top volume. "This is from Sophia. I told her I wanted art supplies. Oh my gosh, it's the good markers. The ones that have 100 colors." Sarah laughed, her hair falling in her face, a smear of purple frosting on her cheek from when Emma had accidentally gotten her during the cake cutting. She was wearing jeans and a light sweater, completely comfortable, completely herself. Emma ripped into another present, and when she pulled out a book about butterflies, she immediately turned to Sarah. "Look, it has the metamorphosis thing you told me about." "That's perfect," Sarah said, helping untangle a ribbon from Emma's hair. "We can read it together." One of Emma's friends, a little boy named Tyler who'd already asked Sarah 17 questions about why the sky was blue, tugged on Emma's sleeve. "Who is that lady?" Emma stood up, brushed grass off her purple dress, and made an announcement loud enough for half the party to hear. "This is Sarah. She's my dad's girlfriend. And she's my friend too. Not mom." The word didn't come up. It didn't need to. Sarah felt her chest tighten with emotion, but in a good way, in the best way, because this was right. This was real. She wasn't trying to be Emma's mother. She was Sarah, who came to ballet recitals and helped with homework and made silly faces and told the truth even when it was hard. "Can we take a picture?" Daniel appeared with his phone, kneeling down next to them. "You two are covered in frosting and I need evidence." Emma immediately threw her arms around Sarah's neck, and both of them stuck their tongues out at the camera. Daniel took about 6 pictures, laughing the whole time, before Emma demanded to see them. She approved of exactly one, and Daniel immediately set it as his phone background. If you've made it this far in Sarah and Emma's story, do us a huge favor and hit that subscribe button for Rich Tides. We share stories about love, second chances, and the families we choose. You won't want to miss what we have coming next. Later, after most of the kids had been picked up and the backyard looked like a tornado made of wrapping paper had touched down, Daniel went inside to get the old photo album Emma had asked to show Sarah. The one with pictures from when she was a baby. On the mantle inside, there was a photograph in a silver frame. Rachel, young and beautiful, staring at the camera with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Distant. Somewhere else even when she was physically present. The photo had been there for years, kept because Daniel thought Emma needed it. He picked it up now, looked at it for a long moment, and then, gently, without ceremony, he moved it to a drawer. Not thrown away, not erased. Just put away. Part of their history, but no longer the centerpiece of their present. When he came back outside, Sarah and Emma were lying on the grass looking at clouds, making up stories about what shapes they saw. Emma's head was on Sarah's shoulder, comfortable and trusting in the way children are when they feel safe. Daniel lay down on Emma's other side, and without planning it, he wrapped his arms around both of them. His daughter, his girlfriend, his family, not a replacement family, not a second chance family, not a make-up for what was lost family, just a family, new and imperfect and real. The late afternoon sun turned everything golden, and somewhere in the trees a bird was singing, and Emma was telling Sarah about how that cloud looked exactly like a dragon wearing a hat, and Sarah was laughing, and Daniel was taking another picture because he wanted to remember this exact moment forever. Emma rolled over to look at Sarah, her small face serious for just a second. She cupped her hand around Sarah's ear like she had a secret, and whispered, "I'm glad you didn't leave." Sarah whispered back, her voice thick with emotion, "I'm glad I stayed, because sometimes the family you find looks nothing like the one you imagined. Sometimes it comes from unexpected places, built on honesty instead of biology, on choice instead of obligation. Sometimes it starts in a restaurant parking lot with tears and truth and a promise to show up. Sometimes it starts with a little girl who needed someone to stay, and a woman who needed to believe she was worth staying for, and a man brave enough to let them both into his broken, healing heart. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's exactly what makes it perfect. Love isn't about replacing what was lost. It's about having the courage to build something new, something real, something worth staying for. So here's our question for you. Have you ever had to make a choice between the safe path and the right path? Between protecting yourself and showing up for someone who needed you? Drop your story in the comments below. We read every single one, and your story might just help someone else find the courage to stay when leaving feels easier. Because in the end, the families we choose, the ones we build with honesty and courage and showing up even when it's hard, those are often the ones that heal us most. How would you rate this story from 0 to 10? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more heart-touching stories coming your way soon.